First thing you might notice is I don't sound very South African. Did you notice that?
No.
I'm afraid I'm not Scottish, but I did, and maybe it's to give a bit of context of why I'm standing here representing South Africa. Back in the early 90s, I started working for a UK BPO firm, consulting firm called Merchants, and we started looking at offshore locations back in 93. We set up in Ireland, and then we wanted to look further afield, and after some investigation we chose South Africa. So I was asked, which was a great privilege at the time, to go out and set up that business in Johannesburg initially in 1997. I had the pleasure of staying in the country 12 years, living there, and then I moved back to the UK. But I think as part of my time in South Africa, I helped set up BPESA, which is the industry body, and therefore I am the UK representative for South Africa here in the UK, and that's why the team asked me to present to you today. My colleagues, we've got Reshni, Tracy, Anton from Reshni is the CEO of BPESA. She's here, and we're all very much looking forward to chatting to you. Seems to be competition between donuts, food. Wine usually wins for me, so I'm sure the wine tasting later, maybe you'll come along and taste some South African wine. But that's why I'm here. I mean, BPESA, Business Process Enabling South Africa, as I said, the industry body. And I think, like most countries, we realise the benefits of having an industry body where you have that one point of contact, that ability to have membership and have a level of quality assurance and just knowledge about the industry. But let me check, first of all, I just want a couple of questions to make sure you're awake. First of all, apart from the three people I mentioned, any South Africans in the room? Welcome, welcome. Quite a large ethnic minority now in the UK. I think London's the 7th largest French city, I'm told by my French friends. There's 1 million South Africans now in the UK. So it is actually a significant ethnic group, and I think that's quite important. I think South Africa and the UK have had a long history, some we won't go into in terms of wars a long time ago, but a long history of trade and of engagement, of people moving between the countries. When I lived in South Africa, I was amazed how many British people lived there. And it's just two countries that have a lot of history and a lot of cultural stories. And I think that's important. I think when you're choosing a destination, to have a country on the same time zone. We seem to have had more lawyers than anyone else on the stage today, and if you're not aware, the South African legal system is based upon the principles of UK law. So contracting in South Africa is very straightforward. As I said, same time zone, many flights every day, overnight, easy to get to. I'm flying on Sunday night and looking forward to being back in South Africa. And so I think it's quite an easy country for British firms, and many British firms have operations in South Africa. And I think that also is a benefit. So let me tell you a bit more about, this is really the major slide I'm going to cover, which is where we talk about our value proposition. I think everyone's got a value proposition. What makes South Africa strong? Cost is important. It's certainly not everything. When I used to sell outsourcing, I used to talk to my clients about three things: cost, performance, and risk. And to me, any good solution has a combination of these three. But let's be frank, cost is an important element. And South Africa, before the government incentives, which are attractive, is a very competitive location in terms of, we estimate on our research, 60-70% saving against the UK basic costs. We've talked a lot, Kerry mentioned the shortage of skills here in the UK, and she also mentioned South Africa sadly has a lot of available workers, which is obviously one of the issues we have in South Africa, is the level of unemployment, and especially youth unemployment. Being an optimist, which being a Scottish sports fan you have to be, being an optimist, that means there's lots of people looking for work. The thing that struck me when I set up the first contact centre in South Africa in, as I said, 97, it was the most uplifting experience of my life to meet people who were truly thankful for a job. And I don't mean that disrespectfully to my country folk here in the UK, who I think many of us do appreciate our jobs. But when you have someone that walks 2 hours to work with no shoes on and shakes your hand and says, thank you, now my whole family get a meal tonight because you've got a job, and they work hard and they work every day they can, it's a very fulfilling experience when you have people of that level of commitment. And you also, I think, tend to get loyalty from that. And we all know how important retention is. So we have an available skilled workforce. Most research shows that South Africa is a very attractive accent and a very successful accent in the BPO and IT sectors. HSBC a few years ago did the largest study I've ever seen of accent. And the conclusion of that is for their customer base, which obviously is not just UK, but they are a UK headquartered bank, was that the South African accent was the most attractive. Easy to understand, clear, good English skills, English spoken at home. While there are 11 official languages in South Africa, English is the predominant language of business, of education, which means children and young people are growing up speaking English. Culturally, there's a lot of affinity with sports, with music, with other things to the UK. So again, they understand the subtleties of language, not just what's learnt from a book. And I think that research shows. We had a session at South African House. If you haven't been to South African House, it's an iconic building in Trafalgar Square here in London. Although I'd rather be here today, I must say, in a beautiful location beside the river. But if you haven't been to South African House, which is truly, really is an iconic building, when you think of Mandela standing there when he came to London after his release. And I think we had a collection of clients there a couple of weeks ago, and they were most of them were utility clients, and they were sharing their experiences of South Africa and other locations. And interesting enough, they all concurred that for collections, South Africa was the most successful operation any of them had in the world. And we dug into that, and I was curious. I wanted to know why collections? Because it sort of resonated with me, because when I was in South Africa, and obviously I'm still involved, the empathy is a very important aspect of South African culture, and often is commented on that the people not just are speaking, but they're understanding, they're empathetic. And they were saying that because many people in South Africa had their own financial challenges, the collections is if any of you have ever done collections calls, I have, when I worked in a call centre, they're tough, probably tougher than sales calls. And I think they all rated South Africa #1. And I think that shows not just the availability of skill, because many countries have available unemployed people, but the challenge is having people who are going to deliver exceptional service to your clients. And I think that's where I think the South African skill is strong. We have a very mature industry. So the South African industry is not based or set up purely for offshoring. To give you an idea of scale, currently we've got about 265,000 people employed in the BPO and ITO sectors in South Africa. We have set targets with the DTIC, the Department of Trade and Industry and Competition, who are the government sponsor of BPESA, and we've got a target of increasing that to 500,000 jobs by 2030. Aggressive, but certainly achievable. And to give you an idea, 20% of that current number is for the offshore market. So when you're discussing South Africa, you're not discussing an industry which is only based upon offshore contracts, because I think that's a weakness. The strength is that we have a very strong domestic market. We've got very strong banking, financial services, telecommunications industries of our own, which employ significant people in the industry. We also have our own local outsourcers, very strong players. And we have obviously international outsourcers who have chosen South Africa as one of their locations. And I think back to my comment on risk, that risk diversification, I think, makes South Africa a very attractive proposition because of our industry. I mentioned some of the verticals there, but the fourth point here of the 8 is some of the strong verticals. To give you an idea, about 70% of all the work done offshore in South Africa fits into 4 industries, which is telecoms, retail, utilities and insurance. And especially I think telecoms is no surprise being number 1 there. The African telecommunications market has been very vibrant since the sort of deregulation and competition entered that market, and South African companies lead the way across not just South Africa but into the whole of the African continent and indeed into the Middle East. We talked about talent. We've also got a lot of work on impact sourcing, on training and development, because obviously while we have a high unemployment rate, we need to make sure these people have the right skills to meet the requirements of yourselves or other prospective employers. And there's a lot of work being done there, some very innovative training programs. As I said, I've never had any problem scaling. The business I set up with 2 of us now employs over 6,000 people. The retention rates are very, very competitive in terms of across the world, far lower than most countries, and the availability of staff is good. Quality, I think we've got a very good governance structure as a country in terms of industry accreditation, in terms of other external accreditations. You know, that's an essential part both of the domestic and the offshore market. I mentioned we already have our own strong domestic market, and we have strong infrastructure. You know, without getting into too much detail, you need strong cables, undersea cables, both sides of the African continent. We've now got a significant increase in cloud. AWS and other hyperscalers have set up significant operations in South Africa, so we're able to provide both the telecommunications and the applications in the cloud, and of course that gives both the cost and flexibility benefits that many people are requesting. Moving on slightly, I didn't get to my third question. How many of you have visited, who are not South African, have visited South Africa? So quite a few. We always say when I was in sales, it was very simple. Get someone to visit South Africa and they'll buy South Africa. I'm not sure if those of you have been would agree, but it's an amazing country. It's a vibrant country. It's got challenges, of course it does. I think all our countries do. But it's an amazing country, and people that visit tend to be very passionate about the people, about the energy, the enthusiasm they see. And in my experience, most people certainly want to go back and want to look for opportunities of doing business. So I'm not going to give you a geography lesson, because I might get some of it wrong, but there are 9 provinces in South Africa. From a point of view of, and one of the benefits is that we now have multiple cities and locations providing services. You know, the domestic telecommunications industry has allowed that to happen. But really, just to give you a sense of the top ones, I mean, the Eastern Cape, you might not, probably the least known province of these 4 to people in Britain. Cities like Port Elizabeth, the Windy City, not to be confused with Chicago. What's it good at? Very good at the automotive industry. A lot of car manufacturing, and a lot of now automotive BPO and ITO services in Port Elizabeth. Gauteng, which is obviously the business capital, where Johannesburg and Pretoria are both based. Probably the dominant industry, obviously Johannesburg's history is mining and other sectors. Probably the most popular in the UK is the Western Cape and Cape Town. Probably people seem to like visiting there more. It's a beautiful place, and it has got a very strong BPO and ITO market, and so does KZN, with Durban being probably, well, obviously the major city, very attractive to some players. So really, just to give you a sense, South Africa is multifaceted from a geographical point of view, and there are some second tier cities and locations that are now growing quite nicely, as obviously staff as the different unemployment rates, people want to set up multiple centres to attract and to access different skill bases. Just moving on, you might be interested, where does South Africa win its business from? 54% from the UK. So the UK is by far the major trading partner in this industry for South Africa. Hence why we put such a focus on being here and of building a strong presence in the UK market. The US is 27%, and we're seeing significant growth in the US market right now. A lot of inquiries coming. And you might be interested, Australia is 6%. There's a lot of cultural, sporting businesses with overlap between Australia and South Africa. But with the first couple of contracts I was involved with, it was really the follow the sun mentality which attracted Australian businesses to choosing South Africa, so they could make sure people were working and not working during the night. We talked about the people. I mentioned, I think, some of the, not just the volume of skill, which is critical, because that gives us an available pool, but also I think this high EQ, this empathy. Those of you who have been to South Africa, those of you who have spoken to South Africans, I think there's a natural warmth that comes through every conversation you have. And I think that's something that people talk about. And we don't talk about it enough. We talk a lot about the cost, we talk a lot about the technology, and I think everything we've talked about today has been very important. But at the end of the day, service is given by people. And people who care about the service they're giving, I think, is a far better experience for the customer. So I think the empathy, I think the availability of staff, of English-speaking staff, and as I said, not just that IQ, but also that EQ, is a really important aspect. So that is what I wanted to quickly cover today. I know our agenda is tight and you're probably getting hungry. I was glad not to be after lunch. It was nicer to be before lunch. But really just to finish up, I'd like to thank you for your time on behalf of BPESA. It's great to be here, and we look forward to the rest of the conference. Myself and my colleagues are available to take any questions, and hopefully I've given you a little bit of insight into why we think South Africa is a strong destination for you to consider. Thank you for your time.